Thank you. If you can find your seats, we'll get started here. Really appreciate all of you turning out on this beautiful day in Northeast Ohio. That's what we live for, correct? Snow, cold weather, and welcome to the sharpest corner of the state. You go any further north, you're in Canada. Any further east, you're in Conneaut, right, Phil Garcia? At least you're wet. We are very grateful to Kent State University Democrats for hosting us here today, along with the Ashtabula County Democrats, AFL-CIO, it's Ashtabula County Young Democrats, that is, AFL-CIO, Ashtabula, Lake, and Geauga County Democrats. And we have a number of officials here that I will introduce briefly. And, I'm State Representative John Patterson. Welcome to the 99th District. And I'll let my fellow representatives and senator introduce themselves, and we'll get into the meat of the matter.
Good afternoon. Great to be here. Thanks for all of you coming out, braving the weather, and the great candidates that we have before us who are going to lead our state in the next election. And let's give them a big hand. We're all going to come together and work together and bring the state back. My name is Sean O'Brien. I am your state senator in the 32nd Senate District.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael O'Brien. I represent the 64th District, which is Trumbull County. And someone just told me I get the award for driving the furthest. But I want to congratulate everyone for being here. Best of luck to the candidates. Great to see everyone here. And enjoy the day, and I'm sure it'll be very informative for everyone. Thank you.
And Mike's being very humble. He also represents the part of Ashtabula County that I don't represent, so we play in the sandbox well together. Also with us here we have a number of candidates. Mary Jane Trapp, Judge Trapp, Betsy Rader with us. We have a number of elected officials locally. Barb Schaub, Roger Corlett, Don Cragen, and we also have a number of local officials. And rather than go through all of them, if you're a locally elected office holder, would you stand up, please, so we can acknowledge you? Township trustees, city council folks, mayors, welcome here. In addition to that, I'd like to give a big round of thanks to my Geauga County chair and the chair of chairs, Janet Patterson. She is up there, she is. Also our timer. And to our local county chair, Dwayne Fear, Ashtabula County. So I'd like to remind you, this is an event that is live streamed. There will be no videos, no audios, and if you cannot resist, we will kindly escort you out. So that's just the ground rules we're working under here, but we're glad to have you here and looking forward to these wonderful candidates and their responses. We're also grateful to have the Star Beacon with us here. Matt Hutton is the editor. And his sidekick, Justin Dennis, is working the crowd on his laptop here. From the Courier, part of the Gazette newspapers, Martha Sorahan. Thank you. And yes, Stephanie, you cannot escape, Stephanie Wessel from the Gazette itself. Thank you. So the last thing for us to do is to honor America, and to do that, we've asked, wait a minute, there's one other person. Kathy DeChristopher, where are you? Head of the Women's Caucus. And I've also been handed a note here. Thank you, Janet. Tom, I didn't see you come in. Lake County Chair. Where are you, Tom? There you are. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. So to honor America, we're going to have a member of the Kent State College Democrats, Kelby Orlando, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you join us, we'll get started right after that. Kelby? Make your choice on the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Kelby. And you're settled in here now, and we're going to get started. The timer candidates. So lovely lady Janet, she's got different, you're familiar with those nasty colors. And stop. Maybe we could have her come down here so you can see her a little bit closer. That would be helpful. Moderators, are you ready? So candidates, good luck. Thank you.
How about now? All right. Thank you again for joining us here in Ashtabula County. We really appreciate that. We will begin with opening remarks. 2 minutes. We'll start with the gubernatorial candidates and move to our downstate candidates from there.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the, oh wow, oh God. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I look out in the crowd, I see many familiar faces. My name's Joe Schiavone, state senator from Youngstown, former minority leader in the Senate. You know, I'm going to kind of go away from a normal 2-minute stump speech opening. I was pushing my kids in the stroller this morning at Giant Eagle and Boardman, and I was looking at all of the headlines of all of the newspapers as we were leaving, and I was so happy that my kids can't read because they're only 3 and 5 years old. Because I'm not sure how I would explain all of the stuff that I was seeing. We have politicians from the East Coast to the West Coast, local government officials, state government officials, congressional folks that are acting like children in many different ways. And if we don't fix this, our country is going to continue to be divided. So when I run for state senate, when I'm running for governor, I'm going to communities to talk to people about what's important to them. And then I'm showing them the things that I've done in the Senate, the things that I've done in my life as a workers' comp lawyer in Youngstown representing injured workers, because actions speak louder than words. And so I want you all to go on my website. It's joeforjobs.com. After this, when you go home, look at all of the plans that I've proposed when it comes to job creation, when it comes to making sure that every single kid has a good opportunity for education, making sure we have clean water throughout the state, making sure that people can go to the doctors when they're sick, making sure that people feel safe when they're walking down the street in their neighborhoods dealing with the drug epidemic. All of these things are the things that every single politician should be talking about rather than all this crazy stuff that we're seeing. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, and I can't wait to field some of your questions. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, I'm Nan Whaley, and for the past 4 years I've had the honor of serving as mayor to one of Ohio's great cities, Dayton, Ohio. One thing I want you to know about me is that you may not always agree with me, but you'll always know where I stand. A true leader takes the stand. A true leader isn't afraid to lead with their values and isn't afraid of bold new ideas and change. It's really the only way I've been able to accomplish anything as a progressive mayor in the reddest part of Ohio. I think we need a governor who's willing to stand up for us, a governor who knows how to get things done, and that has been what I've done as mayor. I've been getting things done, from creating jobs to providing paid parental leave to passing high-quality pre-K for all of Dayton's 4-year-olds. Getting things done is what drives me. It's my passion. It's not just my job. And I think that's what we need to, as governor. I'm going to take that same approach as governor. We need a governor who's going to work in every corner of the state, all the way from Lake Erie, all the way down to the Ohio River, from big cities to small towns, from farms to factories. The problem with Columbus right now is the folks we send there rarely, if ever, come into contact with the citizens they serve. They'd rather take the word of a lobbyist or a CEO than to listen to you. They've turned their backs on our communities, they've turned their backs on our families, and they've turned their backs on creating jobs. Now, I believe that Ohio's best days can be ahead of us, and I hope if you believe that too, you'll consider voting for me, Nan Whaley, for governor. Thanks for being here today.
I'm Robert. I'm Rob Richardson. I'm Rob Richardson, and I'm all the way from the other side of the state, Cincinnati, Ohio. So it's good to be here. Glad to join you here. I'm running for treasurer of the state of Ohio, and I'm running because I believe we need accountability in this office. When you look at the current treasurer, he has not spent any time in actually doing the job, working, listening to people. I will do that. And many of us are on the stage because we actually want to do the job. Steve Belback will tell you the same thing. Kathleen Klein, who couldn't make it here, she actually wants to make sure that people have the right to vote instead of us leading the nation and removing people from the ballot. We can actually do more. In this position, the treasurer, you might not hear a lot about it, but it's a very important position. It's not sexy, but it can do a lot for people. It can do a lot in terms of investing locally for jobs, doing more for economic development, if you're actually focused on the job, and I will be. And not only that, I will make sure to apply innovative leadership. I define innovation as a rebellion against the status quo, not accepting things as they are, and being willing to fight for a better future. So together, we're going to do that and move this state forward. Finally, we will have a focus on expanding access and opportunities for all Ohioans. We are #1 for student debt in the nation. As your next treasurer, I'm going to work with new governors too, with the new governor, with the new state attorney general, and we're going to make sure we turn around the state to provide more opportunities from Ashtabula to Hamilton County, everywhere. We're going to represent all Ohioans and be accountable. I look forward to your help. Rob Richardson, together we can do this. Please visit my site, robforohio.com. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here today. My name's Steve Dettelbach, and I'm running to be the next Attorney General of the state of Ohio. I've spent most of my career as a lawyer, over 2 decades as a prosecutor and as a civil rights attorney. And to me, the idea of the rule of law is pretty simple. There has to be just one set of rules that applies to everybody. It applies to protect every single person, no matter how vulnerable, and it applies to hold everybody accountable, no matter how powerful. That's the idea of the rule of law. But I'll tell you something, for too many people in Ohio, as I've gone around the state, I've heard that that ideal is not their reality. That they think and they feel that there's one set of rules that apply to people who have money and power and connections, and another for everybody else. And too often they're right. As a prosecutor, as a civil rights attorney, and as Attorney General, we have to fight to make sure that that ideal is real. We have to fight to make sure that people who are vulnerable, who are getting taken advantage of, and people who are getting addicted and dying because of the heroin and opioid epidemic, have somebody fighting to make sure that they have access to treatment, that they have protection from the cartels. And we have to fight to make sure that powerful people are held accountable, so that as our schools are underfunded, as our kids' public education is under attack, that $1 billion isn't bled to an online for-profit charter school called Econ, because they give $2.1 million to their Republican budget. That's not easy. I've seen it. I've prosecuted corrupt politicians in both parties. It's always a fight to make sure the rule of law is real. It's always uncomfortable. But we owe it to the people who are counting on us to represent them to take that fight on. That's what I want to do as your Attorney General.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to questions, and we'll start with our gubernatorial candidates here. So the first question I have is, voters in many traditionally blue counties like Ashtabula voted for Republicans down ticket from federal to state to local in races 2016, and they cited frustration with the direction of the country and the state. What specific vision can you offer to voters who are feeling forgotten by their government leaders? And we'll start with them here with me.
So one of the reasons why I decided to run for governor was actually I did a bus tour of 18 cities with 25 mayors in 4 days all through Ohio last September for Hillary Clinton. And one of the things I saw was I saw that there were lots of Democratic mayors across the state working very hard on behalf of their folks and very proud of their communities, but they were getting absolutely no help from the state of Ohio. They lost their partner with the state. The state has basically walked from most of our local communities. They're not really interested in providing any sort of resources to local communities, and I think it's affecting our ability to create jobs. It's one of the reasons why for 60 straight months, Ohio has been behind the nation on jobs, because we're not investing in our local communities, we're not investing in the infrastructure, we're not investing in our workforce or our young people. And it was a really awakening for me as mayor. I know that every day working in Dayton, I'm frustrated with them, with the cuts, but to see it even in smaller communities was something that really struck with me. And I think that that's what's happening in this past election, and it's in the conversation today that we see every day. You know, Ohioans feel forgotten, they feel invisible, and they feel ignored. They feel they send, folks down to the State House, and they pay no attention to the needs of their communities and no attention to the needs of their families. As a mayor, you have got to get things done. You've got to take action because we're where the rubber meets the road. And as governor, that's what I would do. I would make sure that we have policies that put into place to create jobs, to make sure that we can move these communities forward. I think there's opportunities in these communities if they have a real partner in the State House, which they don't right now.
Yeah, I mean, the people that you're talking about are my neighbors, my father-in-law. You're talking about people that are very, very frustrated because they feel disconnected from their elected officials. And all they want is somebody good. They want somebody real. They want somebody that understands how to fix problems and tries to work together first and fight second. So I've been down in the State House for 9 years working through this stuff. I started as a 29-year-old guy that didn't have a day of political experience, but I went down to the State House because I wanted to make it better for my community. So I started working on things that I saw, not some stuff that political experts are telling you. We had a city of Youngstown that was built for 250,000 people that 70,000 people were living in. So we needed money for demolition and revitalization. So I pushed for revitalization of my community. I saw these for-profit charter schools flying in the nights, putting signs up, and taking all the kids out of the public schools and making money off them. So I proposed accountability pieces and transparency pieces for charter schools year after year after year. Finally, we're starting to make some progress because we shamed the Republicans into actually doing something. House Bill 2 passed last year about switching sponsors and closures, so we're finally making progress. Governor Kasich finally is saying, oh yeah, we got to invest ECOT. $80 million has been wasted. So you can put pressure from the minority in Columbus by talking about things that are important to the people at home and bringing people's voices to the State House. I've worked through Senate Bill 5 for collective bargaining. I've worked through privatization of our food services in prison, privatization of our developmental centers. All of these crazy abortion bills that come out every single day I have to stand up and fight for. These are things that are really important to people, but it's about relating to the people you represent and then working as hard as you can to improve quality of life for them. Forget about scoring political points. Forget about who makes the best political argument. It's about helping people and making change, and that's what I've tried to do in the State House in order to get these voters back.
Okay, I have a question for all of you. Ohioans need higher paying full-time jobs. Do you support the $15 minimum wage? Why or why not? Let's start with Mr. Roberts.
So, Rob Richardson, yes, I support a $15 minimum wage, and it's what we have to do to get more. It's going to take a lot more than that to get high-paying jobs, though. So we have to make we have to make that clear. That by itself, doing that will not $15 an hour is not enough. One, two, that by itself won't be enough. We have to invest in the jobs for the future. We have to be willing to actually provide affordable education and access to it. We're number one in student debt for a reason. Part of it, the big reason is we haven't invested for years. 24 out of the last 28 years have been one party in power. That's the Republican Party. And their priority has not been investing in people for the long term. It's been investing in millionaires and billionaires that have not been giving back to our state. So we need to change our priorities to actually investing in working people. That would make a big difference. That would be my start.
Yes. Look, people that Joe was talking about, that Nam was talking about, that Rob was talking about, are hurting, and they're working harder than ever. They're working 40-hour a week jobs. They're coming home. They're putting their stuff down, saying hi to their kids, and heading back out again for another 30-hour a week job. That's totally unacceptable, especially when people at the top of the food chain are making millions and millions of dollars more than ever. Look, my experience in talking to people, look, I'm a prosecutor. I don't do economic policy, but there's something called fairness. And my experience talking to people is when they see a system where people at the top of the food chain fail and still get golden parachutes, and people at the bottom of the food chain are digging ditches and getting nothing, it makes people dial out. The strength of our state and the strength of our country has always been the idea that if you work hard and play by the rules, you can do better for your kids than you had yourself. And when people start questioning that, and when people start thinking that's not possible anymore, the thing that makes our country so special, the thing that makes us different than all that have come before us, we start losing that. We can't afford to lose it. It's not right, and we have to fight to make sure it doesn't happen.
As I travel around the state, I think about all of the cities and all of the people when I look in the crowds, and yeah, of course we need to do something about wages. I think we have to be realistic with people. I think we got to shoot for the $12, $13 an hour before we go straight to 15 in Ohio. I think it's just being real with people, but it's about making sure that we invest in the state first. The tax cutting policy from Columbus has gotten us in the position where we are today. Every year the Republican majority stands up on the Senate floor, talks about $1.6 billion tax cut to everyone, but they don't say that most of it goes to the top earners. Then we do LLC loopholes and all of these tax loopholes in order to allow more people with means to have more means, but there's never any investment in the people. So the bills that I've proposed and the ideas that I've come out with invest in Ohio first. As you travel from southeast Ohio all the way up the river and across the lake, if we don't fix the brownfields across the state, then we're not going to have businesses that are going to want to come in because they're not going to put $5 million in 5 years in to clean up the sites. If we don't have broadband access for people, businesses will not come. If we don't do anything about what's going on with clean water from the lake to the river, they're not coming. So I have water bond bills for clean water, infrastructure bills for investment, broadband expansion for everyone, brownfield restoration across the state. You got to invest first, and then you attract businesses so our young people can stay.
Yes, I support a raise of the wage. I think that it probably needs to go on the ballot this coming November because, quite frankly, the state legislature, barring Senator Schiavone and the great reps and senators you have here, aren't interested in moving that forward. The majority will stop that. So we need to make sure that that's on the ballot next November, and I think there are folks talking about that to make sure, and we need to make sure we win. It doesn't work if we aren't successful in raising that wage for folks. I was in Lake County, nearby here, and I met a woman named Nancy. Nancy works at one of the Lake County public schools. She has worked there 16 years. Just this year, she's making over $30,000 a year. That's the first time she's passed over $30,000 a year in one of our public schools. It's not enough money for Nancy to provide for her family, so she goes and gets another job as a cashier at a local grocery store. This is what's happening over and over and over again in our communities. People are working their tails off. They're not getting enough money to pay and provide for their families, and so they have to spend more time in another job that doesn't pay anything to provide for their community and their families. And look, it's got to stop. We've got to close these loopholes for corporations, because in addition to that, they do those cuts, and they claim they cut the taxes, and then your local communities have to pass a property tax because of the cuts that they made to their local communities. So who's paying more? You all are. And that's what's going on over and over and over again with these folks in Columbus. So we have to make sure that we get good quality jobs by both raising the wage on the ballot next November, but also talking about how we have to have a dignity of work in this state. And if we don't do that, we're going to get further and further behind, and we have to hold these guys in Columbus accountable.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. We're going to go back to the governor candidates right now. We'll start with Mayor Willie. The question I have is, all local municipalities over the past few years have seen serious state-level funding cuts that have forced programs to be slashed and seen local taxpayers asked to carry larger burdens from schools to county commissioners to township trustees. What would your administration do to try to resolve some of that?
Look, I'm in this race because of what's happened to local communities. You know, we've seen this in Dayton, we've seen these in the counties. The counties are dealing right now with the MCO sales tax issue, which will mean more cuts to services that the counties are providing and local transit. So I believe, and it's kind of wild being a progressive, that the best policy is the one closest, the best government is the one closest to the people. And we need to go back to having local communities be able to be funded by, you know, in a partnership with the state, so we don't actually end up raising taxes across the state, which is what has happened because of the cuts to local government fund. Create that partnership again and get rid of preemption from the state. This state house takes all the money from your schools, takes all the money from your city halls, takes all the money from the county, cuts those to bits, and then tries to tell you as a local official what you're supposed to do in addition to it. So it's insult to injury. So I can be really clear that that is what drove me in this race as mayor. I believe that, you know, local officials are where the rubber meets the road, and it's where they know what's best for their communities, and I want to give them those opportunities to make sure that they have the dollars that they need, and that they're able to have the opportunity to make decisions for their community. It's something that I'm very passionate about as a mayor. Also, this state is very diverse. What works up here on the lake does not work down in Marietta. And so we need to make sure that we have those opportunities so those communities can make decisions for themselves. It will help them grow jobs, it will help them grow opportunity, and it will help them allow to keep young people in their communities. That is not happening right now. There is no partnership with state and local communities right now.
Yeah, every politician will say that it's a priority to fund local government. It's a priority to make sure that we fix the school funding formula, but then they don't do it. The priority is really the tax cut because that's what you see coming out of the State House every single year. So when I say it's a priority, you have to fund it like a priority. In 1997, the Supreme Court said that we're over-reliant on property tax and we're funding public schools in an unconstitutional manner. And instead of actually doing something, politicians have done nothing. They just patchwork it every single year, put together a little spreadsheet. The school doesn't know how much they're going to get this year. They don't know how much they're going to get next year. They don't know how much they're going to get in the third year. And so they don't know how to figure out the services necessary and how they're going to pay for those services for their kids in order to give them that opportunity. And so I talk to superintendents, I talk to school board members. It's about a governor that's going to take this by the reins and put together a school funding plan that invests from the state level so that you don't have to get bagged in levies every year, so that we can actually invest in the future. Same with local governments. It's not about just doing a spreadsheet and sending it out to all the communities and say, take it or leave it, here's what you're getting. It's about getting a governor that's going to get an administration to go into community by community to figure out the needs of the people. And when you figure out the needs of the people, then you can invest and then you can address the needs of the people in order to provide an improved quality of life. So it's just about taking the time to fix the school formula as well as the local community investments.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move now down to our downstate candidates. I want to give them a proper introduction. We've got Rob Richardson, who is our candidate for state treasurer, and Steve Delbach, who is our candidate for attorney general. I'm going to start with a question for our attorney general candidate, which is one of our big concerns in Ashtabula County, which is the opioid epidemic, and how would your office go about dealing with that?
I served as the presidentially appointed U.S. attorney in the Obama administration in the Northern District of Ohio, and this was in my territory. And I stood alongside your sheriff and your county prosecutor in the basement of the sheriff's office here and announced a really significant indictment involving cartels that had reaches right here in Ashtabula County that were distributing heroin and opioids. And you know what stuck out to me about that case? I still remember it. I talk about it. Wasn't how many people got charged. It wasn't what happened to them. It was a piece of evidence. In that case, there was a 911 tape from a girl who was under 10 years old. And she was dialing 911 from a motel room here in Ashtabula because her mother was dead from a heroin overdose on the bed next to her. You know, this isn't about just numbers. This is about our mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and neighbors who in Ohio are dying next to us. 4,000. We are leading the country in heroin and opioid epidemic, in deaths, right? We're ahead of bigger states. We're ahead of, almost anybody, really anybody. And we haven't been able to find the creativity and the resources to get people access to treatment. We haven't been able to stop the flow of pills, hundreds of millions of pills that have flowed into our state in violation of the rules and gotten people on the on-ramp to heroin and opioid addiction. Right? We have to not just arrest people. I mean, I spent 20 years arresting people and prosecuting them. But we also have to be more creative on those other parts of this problem. Right? We have to talk to insurance companies about whether or not they're going to cover people who need opioid addiction, or whether we're just going to have a system where we send them in, get them clean, and send them back out, and then wonder why they get back on after months. And we have to have a conversation about holding pharmaceutical companies accountable for the devastation that they have caused in our state.
This next question is for Rob Richardson, State Treasurer candidate. Where do you stand on tightening state budgets that cut funding to programs and services that help seniors with health care?
Well, I would be against those cuts, and it hasn't been a priority, as I've said, to invest in people in this state for a really long time. So you can be both fiscally responsible while empowering people, and I've had experience doing that. I led the University of Cincinnati. I was chairman of the board. We have over $1 billion budget there. We also saw record growth within our institution. We're the second largest university in the entire state. 5 years in a row, we've had the largest enrollments we've ever had. We were voted during my term on the board as the #1 return on public investment for any public institution in the United States. So this can be done. We did this while investing in people, while investing in scholarships, while also growing and being fiscally responsible. The two are not diametrically opposed forces. We're just told that by people in the State House and some in Washington that they are for big government. They're just helping their friends and really at the expense of the many people. So we can invest in seniors, we can invest in people, we can invest in students while still being fiscally responsible, and that's what I will do as the next treasurer of the state of Ohio.
I would go ahead and open this question up to all four of our candidates. It originally was going to be about whether or not you felt Justice O'Neill should resign given his declared candidacy, but I'd also like to expand it in light of the national story that came out Friday on his comments on sexual harassment, about your thoughts on A, whether or not he should resign, but B, a larger discussion about sexual harassment and how you would deal with that on the state level. We'll start with Senator.
I think when you look at what has happened, I mean, you've read a lot about it in the last month, but this has been going on for decades, right? Where you have men in powerful positions in the State House and in government that are taking advantage of that power and taking advantage of women in many different ways. And so we need to have channels for reporting in the State House and in business so that women feel comfortable making these complaints and with people that are actually going to investigate them. So it's not just this he said, she said thing where you feel so uncomfortable and then all of a sudden you have all these people looking at you and talking about you and all of these things that have occurred for years and years and years. That's how we deal with it in the State House. As for Judge O'Neill, I think my comment spoke for itself in the paper the other day. You know, he's talking about running for governor. He's on Facebook and Twitter talking about how many women he slept with. Like, let's concentrate on being a judge or hang it up, because you can't do all this at the same time, right? So let's just either focus on your job or just be done with it and let somebody else that's going to focus on it move forward with their career. So I think that's what we should do when it comes to State House reporting and the O'Neill issue.
Yeah, I think that the issue with Justice O'Neill's comments was just how clear he doesn't understand what sexual harassment is. And I think that the issue was that, you know, we obviously have a lot of work to do on what's been going on, as Joe said, for decades. And I'm emboldened, frankly, by the conversations and the number of women that are coming forward, fearless, and stepping forward and sharing their stories. I think it's an incredibly powerful time to be a woman, and I'm incredibly proud of the women that are stepping forward after 10 and 20 years across this country. And we shouldn't miss that opportunity in our state either. And I think the issue with Justice O'Neill's comments was he was trying to miss the point. And that's what is really frustrating about this. This isn't a joke. This isn't funny. This has been happening to women in the workforce for decades. And people need to understand that we're just not going to take it anymore. I think the other thing that's really important is that, you know, in the State House, in the top 200 cities and mayor across the country, in governor seats, 20% of the State House are women. 20% of the top 200 cities in the country have a woman as mayor. We need more women to run for office. We need more women to be leaders, and we need more women to be elected officials. And if we do that, more and more of this will be unacceptable because women will be in control and have power too. And that, I think, is the best way to continue this dialogue and to say this is unacceptable in our community, it's unacceptable in our government, and it's unacceptable in our businesses.
So, starting off with Bill O'Neill, I'm quite embarrassed that he's even a member of the party. So, of course, he should resign. That's an easy question, frankly. The tougher question is, what do we do at this moment? And as a male, I have to acknowledge that there is real male privilege. That's true. And if this issue is if we're ever going to move past this, more men have to step forward and hold other men accountable. We can't just ask women to hold men accountable. And so this is not a problem this is a problem clearly with politicians, but not just politicians. It's a problem from Main Street to Wall Street. It's a problem with families. And the issue is easy when we disagree with somebody and they make it so apparent. This is easy in terms of Bill O'Neill. What's harder is when you're close to someone and you have to hold them accountable. That is the real truth. Because we don't see it. We see on one side, people can say if they're fine with what Ray Moore does, and on the Democratic side, we have our challenges as well. It's never acceptable. We have to hold everyone accountable. It's not a race issue. It's not particular to any run race, income, or status. Sexual harassment and frankly sexual assault has been pervasive for a really long time. And so I want the conversation, of course, we don't want any type of sexual harassment. There's zero tolerance for it. But beyond that, I hope the conversation is that men have stepped up, because most of the time, unfortunately, as Mayor Whaley said, men are still in every level of power in society in power. So they have to step up. And when we step up and hold each other accountable, then the conversation can be in the next generation how far we've come and how far women have advanced the position of leadership and power. That's what I hope the conversation is in 20 years, but it won't be unless men step forward.
When Bill O'Neill issues his statement, his Facebook post, whatever it was on Friday, he claimed to be speaking, I think, for all, as he put it, heterosexual men. So I issued a statement because it sure as heck doesn't speak for me. And in the statement, among other things, I said that a person who said the things that he said is not fit to run for the office of governor of the state of Ohio. Now, look, it is important that courageous women are speaking up, but Rob is right. It's on us as men to be speaking up now more than ever. And for me, there's so many things that need to be said, but let's just start with one that pretty simple stuff you tell your kids. For the men out there who don't get this, first of all, just keep your darn hands to yourself. All right, let's just start with some pretty basic stuff. And second, we have to do things to hold people accountable, whether that's in a boardroom or whether it's in Washington or whether it's in Alabama or whether or not it's in Columbus. And I will tell you, it's very distressing to me to see that the person who's currently the Attorney General of the state of Ohio disbanded the office that was supposed to be watching these things when a complaint came having to deal with somebody that he knew. We can't have that. And the first thing I'll do when I'm the Attorney General of the state is we will make sure that there is somebody in that office and that that office is functioning again. Because we cannot have two sets of rules, right? It's something that we have to work at. It's something that we have to stick at. I'll tell you what I'm scared of. What I'm scared of is that after this rush of unity and reform, that this will once again slip to the back burner. And it just can't. You know, this is a problem we have to keep constant vigilance on to make sure that we're calling it out wherever we see it.
Okay, we're going to move over to education for a minute. Governor candidates. Since 1997, the Ohio Supreme Court has determined that the way we raise funds for our schools is incorrect and illegal. How will you tackle this issue since both parties have done nothing?
Well, again, I think we've talked about this a little bit already. The fact of the matter is that the state has continued to make the reliance on property taxes, not only for schools, but look at the human service levies, look at the levies for fire, if you're in a township, for fire, for police. The reliance on property tax has become almost, well, in some places it's untenable. And that's because they want to be in Columbus, patting themselves on the back about how they cut, you know, the income tax for the very wealthy, or actually have some people pay absolutely nothing in income tax. And the burden goes back on regular, everyday people in their local communities. In Monroe County, over in the southeastern part of the state and on the West Virginia line, this past election, 22 seats went unfilled. No one wanted to run for local office in Monroe County. Why? I would guess that they don't want to tell their friends and neighbors that they can't provide for the services that they need because they don't have the dollars to do it. This robbing Peter to pay Paul stuff that's been going on at the State House for the past 8 years has come home to roost on our schools and on our local communities. It's the reason why I decided to get in this race. We need someone that's at the State House, that is the governor, that understands what is going on in local communities, understands the tough choices local communities have to make, and understand the issues that the school systems are making every single day. This continuation to think that if they close, you know, they have wealthy people not pay any taxes, that somehow we're going to create jobs and everybody's going to get better off. Look, if it worked, they've been doing it for 15 years, I wouldn't be running for governor because we have so much money in Dayton, we wouldn't know what to do with it. But it is not working. We have been continuing, getting further and further behind on job numbers, and we need a new way forward when it comes to tax policy in this state.
Can I address the Durolf issue, 1997? You know, the Supreme Court says we're not doing this right. And so if nothing happens, and instead of actually addressing the problem and funding schools the way they need to be funded, they start introducing this for-profit privatization model of education. So you start seeing the for-profit brick and mortar schools popping up in all of the urban communities because it's easy pickings for them. They go in the communities, they promise parents things, the kids get pulled out of the public school that's really trying to fight for them and give them opportunities, and moving them into the private for-profit model. Those kids are now going back into the public schools 2 years behind where they were when they left. So in bigger cities with a lot of people, you see that for-profit brick and mortar setup. But out here and all the way down the river and in Western Ohio, you see the electronic learning model that is sucking kids out of the public school and into their living room. So they're sitting in their living room in front of a computer screen all day long without accountability. We don't know what they're doing all day long. All we know is that they're checking in the morning, and those electronic models receive the same amount of dollars as the brick and mortar school down the street from here that has to provide transportation, heat, food, all of these things that you don't take for, you don't understand, right? And so the bills that I've suggested in the General Assembly fund public schools properly by putting accountability and transparency on those for-profit models and taking profit out of education. At the same time you do that, you loosen up the restrictions on standardized tests, so you give teachers the ability to be flexible so they can actually teach kids things in a way that are maybe fun or exciting or innovative, outside of the box thinking that gives kids a good opportunity for the future. So it's about loosening those restrictions, at the same time making sure that we hold these schools accountable for their actions.
this is going to be interactive, and so now we're going to kind of shift gears a bit and come back to these written questions, but we're going to rely on you, the audience, to come up with your questions for our candidates here. And I have a postscript here. Zach Space was going to be here with us today. He apologizes. His mother had a stroke, and he wished to be with her, and we wish the very best. Keep Zach and his mom in your prayers. And we also know that Senator Schiavone is going to be having to leave a little bit after 2 o'clock, so we're going to focus some attention on him before he takes off. So with that being said, I'll be running around here with the microphone to those of you who would like to ask a question for the next few minutes until I'm directed otherwise. Well said? Well said. All right. Who would like to lead us off here? I see Mr. Ray Gruber from our local AFL-CIO and Harpersfield Township trustee with a question. You want to stand up?
Yes, son. My question for the candidates is this. In southern Ohio, one of the townships down there, which has home rule, recently passed legislation where they wanted to do right to work. Since then, they've pulled back because of the opposition, but they based everything off of the Kentucky ruling, which gave them the right, they felt, to do that. Now, we also know in the State House that bill's been introduced and is sitting there right now in the public and private sector. What are your feelings toward right to work in the state of Ohio, especially in the townships and the state?
Well, I think that we've talked about it. You know, I've fought right to work. I was the ranking member of Senate Bill 5 for collective bargaining when they tried to take away collective bargaining from working class people. I've been on the front lines of these school takeovers, on these privatizations of food service and prison, on the privatization of the developmental centers, and recently on the new one that they just put into a BWC budget to limit the statute of limitations from 2 years to 1 year for injured workers. This is something that's going to hurt injured workers across the state when it comes to workers' compensation and the coverage. So when it comes to labor rights, when it comes to workers' rights, you know that you always have somebody in me that will be on the front lines of fighting that. You know, if you look at what has happened with Senate Bill 5, you know, they went for it all. They went for it all, and they thought they were going to get it, but the people backlashed because they forgot that in our Constitution you have the right to the referendum, and I was able to see the power of the people in that movement. So they haven't pushed forward with right to work because they know they're going to get their butts kicked again. But what they do is they go inch by inch, point by point, softening you up and hitting you low when they can in order to get those rights and take those rights, similar to that workers' comp bill that I just talked about. So it's about getting somebody in there that will be a safeguard as governor, because you got to remember, we have the power of the pen. And so if the legislature passes something, you can veto it and make them come back and put 3/5 of the chamber and show the people why it's so important to go after that issue twice. So I think that's it's in the weed stuff, but it's real stuff and something that a governor has to understand.
I was proud to be the chief of staff on the No on Senate Bill 5 campaign in 2011. So I traveled to Columbus every day to protect the rights of our workers to organize in the city of Dayton and across the state of Ohio, and is proud to see a double-digit margin push back on that. And I think that Senator Schiavone's right, that has cooled them off, but now I know the Butler County issue that you're talking about, and have helped organize against that township as well, to make sure that we protect collective bargaining rights all across the state of Ohio, which I think is really, obviously, very key. I'm proud, too, to be the first community in the state of Ohio to pass a resolution supporting labor rights in the Frerichs issue at the Supreme Court. We continue to be very nervous about what happens to Janice this coming summer and spring, so we continue to be very diligent in probably the area of the state that is most anti-labor, as you pointed out, and I'm proud of that work. On a personal level, I have to say that this has been a key part of my life, and I'm proud to continue that. I still have a minute, right, Shannon? Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. I'm proud to do that work. My dad was an iron worker that became a UAW member, when he went inside, actually lost his job at the age of 59 when they closed the plants during the Great Recession. I'm originally from Indiana. When Indiana went to right to work for less, my parents actually moved to Cincinnati. They just couldn't take it anymore and crossed over to make sure that they could be in a state that is really surrounding us. I mean, this is an issue that we have to be diligent on, and 2018 is a key year because these guys will start moving if we are not successful this year. I'm also very proud of everybody that is running. I think, at least in the governor's race today, are very pro-labor, and I think that speaks a lot about where the Democratic Party is with working families and working people in this state, and I'm proud of that too, to be with them. Thank you.
First let me start out by echoing that comment about Zach Space. I've spent a lot of time with Zach recently. I'm sure he would want to be here. Many of you know him, tremendous candidate for auditor, and he's a heck of a lot better than the auditor we have now. Yeah, that's not a hype. Right to work is wrong, and we need to speak out against it and fight it. It's like playing whack-a-mole, as these guys have pointed out, because it keeps coming back and back and back again. The other thing, though, on issues involving working people, and I say this as the son of a public school teacher and a lawyer who brought cases on behalf of injured workers, is, you know, as the Attorney General, your number one role is to make sure that the law is actually enforced. And, you know, I hear this all around the state. You know, a lot of times you hear from Republicans, oh, you're not enforcing the law, you don't want to enforce the law. Until there's a law that they don't agree with, right? So, for instance, the law that requires that we actually pay workers' comp and issue W-2s to people who are actual employees of people instead of pretending that they're independent contractors and getting a 20% discount and leaving these people cutting them out to dry. And, you know, as Attorney General, I will tell you that fighting that independent contractor fraud, fighting wage theft, fighting people who are ignoring prevailing wage laws all across the state. Right now we have 2 investigators for the entire state to deal with all those problems would be a huge priority. You know, it can't just be that you enforce the laws that you happen to agree with and ignore the ones that you don't like. And that's what we're doing now. And shocker, it's the ones that protect working people that we're ignoring.
You know, I would say right to work is a complete fraud. There are no rights and there's no work. Everywhere it's been implemented. Everyone is paid less. This is not just about union workers. Everyone is paid less. There are more injuries. It is a complete fraud, and that's what we need to say, because that's what it is. And I also look at this very personally because I am very fortunate to be on this stage. I can say that those in the labor movement love this country, and we need to start claiming that. And I love this country too. And I understand it because it's a personal story of mine. My father came from Alabama to Cincinnati, and he started pursuing his degree in electrical engineering, but got a little side path and he met this beautiful, strong person who was my mother, and they got pregnant. And so he had to drop out of school, but he had a great opportunity to work as a laborer instructor, as a laborer in the field. He did that for 7 years. And although he wasn't able to graduate, a building he literally helped build is where I took my classes, and I received my degree in electrical engineering, and I am now also a proud member of the Laborers International Union. That story is the story of a lot of Ohioans and a lot of Americans. It's the story of Italian Americans, Polish Americans, Latino Americans. It's the story of all of us. So we love this country too, the labor movement does, and we're going to start claiming that. Because despite what you might hear from the person that's currently occupying the White House, what's always made America great is diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and diversity itself.
Yeah.
I have a question here, and I'll get to you. Hand this over. Would you state your name and where you live and your question?
My name is Sue Stromberg, and I'm from Lake County, Ohio. And I'd like to direct questions to gubernatorial candidates and ask what would be your policies regarding renewable energy in Ohio, and please listening to field.
Absolutely. She asked about renewable energy. And so if people have been following what's going on in the State House in the last couple of years, we had goals in place, mandates in place in order to establish increasing the reliance on renewable energy. Then all of a sudden, the General Assembly last year passed a bill to put a freeze on those standards. And I stood up on the Senate floor that day and I said, I've been through these freezes before and other things. A freeze, you never thaw out this freeze, because you do a 2-year freeze and then you do a study committee to study the freeze and then you do a subcommittee to study the subcommittee's decision. And so I'm worried that we're going down that road of keeping that freeze permanent. And so the first order of business would be to go back to the drawing board with the General Assembly, figure out if we can set these goals in a way that's workable, making sure that we are more reliant on alternative energy sources. It's about making sure that we protect our clean water. It's about making sure that we protect future generations. There's plenty of jobs attached to these alternative sources of energy. We just have to invest in them. And you do it in a way that show people the value. Show people the value in the workplace. Show people the value when it comes to the environment, and move together as a state.
One of the things that's most surprising about their freeze on the renewable energy is they're walking away from jobs that are being created now in Pennsylvania, jobs that are being created in Indiana and Michigan, all around us, because they didn't want to invest in what is going to be the future. And I think that is a problem. I typically agree with what the Nature Conservancy's line has been on renewables. They show that the most Ohioans, in every poll, want more renewable energy. They want opportunities for us to invest in renewables, and we're not doing that. We're going the other direction, and it's another example where the state is walking away from job opportunities. Further, when it comes to wind turbines, the other thing was I think it was one House member or one Senate member didn't like wind turbines, so they changed the set-aside. Didn't even realize they were doing it, he just got it in the bill. And so now wind turbines cannot really exist because of the rules based on property lines and set-aside. Again, we're walking away from opportunities for jobs in this state just because of ideological beliefs by a few in the State House. We need to get back on the track that Governor Strickland did on this work. I think he did a great job on renewable energy, and there's great opportunities for job growth all across the state of Ohio, and we're missing that opportunity and giving it to our states around us. And that's just another example of how they claim they're willing to create good paying jobs, but they're really not interested in doing that. That's why for the past 15 years we continue to see less and less good paying jobs in this state. As governor, I'd make sure that we continue to go back to the way that Governor Strickland had this policy, and then also make sure that we're investing in common sense ideas that just get even with the rest of the Midwest on this issue. Would be great for our communities, our states, and for job growth.
And I know this next one. Let me sprint over there. One of my former students, now a graduate, now working in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes.
We're very proud of you, by the way.
Hello, my name is Marian Burrell. I'm originally from Roman Shores, and now I'm working in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Senate. My question is more about human trafficking. So drug trafficking is getting all of the limelight, and all the sexual assault cases are now coming out. And I'm more curious about what initiatives you guys have to help stop and help prevent the human trafficking issue coming further. Ohio, many of you might not know, but Ohio is in the top 5 states of leading in sex trafficking, and Toledo is the nation, or like our state's capital for sex trafficking, and I think that's something that needs to be brought up. So I'm just curious as to what initiatives you guys have to help prevent the hundreds of thousands of children and women that are in this.
I'll start. Senator I know, a great senator named Sherrod Brown, says something. He says, don't tell me what you think, show me what you've done, and I'll tell you what you think. So as U.S. Attorney and as a lawyer in the Civil Rights Division, I actually prosecuted myself one of the largest modern human trafficking cases in the country. And as U.S. Attorney here,
when I started, we actually weren't doing any human trafficking work. I was actually at a retirement party for an FBI agent. Another FBI agent called me over and said, "Dettleback, why aren't you doing any human trafficking cases?" I checked it out, and people said, "Oh, those are really state cases. They're prostitution cases." I was sitting there, right, I was having a reaction, but I held it inside. And instead of reacting, we fixed it. So we started human trafficking task forces in Toledo and in Cleveland, right? We got people to understand that these aren't cases that are state cases, that are prostitution cases, and when people, guys, stand in line to pay $20 to have sex with a 12-year-old, that is not prostitution, that is commercialized rape. And that what we need to do is to not only work with law enforcement, but work with people in the nonprofit community to make sure that we're not only hearing about these crimes, but we're also making sure the victims aren't victimized a second time in the system. And we did a lot of work on that. When I left, we'd actually done over 50 federal cases involving human trafficking, and AUSAs and agents and prosecutors and police were fighting for those cases. And the reason they were fighting for those cases is what I said before, which is when people understand that you can use the law to protect vulnerable people, they'll crawl through the desert for that chance. They'll fight for that chance. All we need to do as leaders is to give them the opportunity to fight for vulnerable people, to fight for the victims of human trafficking, and they'll do it. That's what I want to do as Attorney General.
And I'll just be a second, because I'm not going to add a lot to that. We have to tighten up the laws, makes in a sensible way in order to lock these folks away and protect the victims. But on the back end of that, I've met a lot of victims of human trafficking throughout the years in the Senate. It will rip your heart out. And the problem that I see is they've gone through so much, and then on the back end, they don't know where to go. So even when they get out of all of this craziness, out of all this horribleness, you got to give them an opportunity in life. And so it's about beefing up the foster care system. It's about giving opportunities on the back end of this so that we can show people that there is opportunity here in Ohio and protections in place. So it's about front end, making sure our laws are shored up, and on the back end, giving people those opportunities out.
I would just add, I think Steve's point is terrific and obviously very passionate. He'll be a great Attorney General on this issue. But also, I think we can't underestimate what the opioid crisis is doing when it comes to human trafficking and the connection that is having, and the exasperation that's having on all these systems. And what we see, at least in Dayton and along the I-75 corridors, the connection between the two is so very heavy. And when you talk about a foster care system that has had a 20% increase in the number of foster children, and the lack of resources, again, that the state is providing for these issues, you can't get the system up to deal with that issue as well. And so we really have to pay attention to how they're connected, make sure that we're really investing in that, and that we're really putting our money where our mouth is when we say that these children deserve a good life, but then we don't invest in the foster care system. Are we really, really being honest about that? Because that's not working. And I think that the work that local communities can do to connect to both state and federal around the opioid crisis is a way that we can really get to the heart of this matter as well.
Well, I'm going to let the audience think for a bit. I have a question for you, and it really impacts Ashtabula County here. Friday, I was going to an engagement, and I was stuck behind a school bus, and it dawned on me, and I like getting stuck, especially Geneva buses, Eric, because that means our kids are getting a quality education. But it dawned on me that the class of 2030 are kindergartners on that bus. Now, why do I say 2030? Because in that year, a third of the population in Ashtabula County is going to be 60 and older. We have this issue of an aging population in Ohio bearing down upon us, which is reflective of the brain drain that we have experienced not only in this county, not only in this district, but in the state for years. What will you do to encourage and incentivize our young people to work and stay in Ohio to build our future from the inside out?
And that's a great question. I wish that the high school students were able to hear it, because I was going to discuss that when we had the opportunity. You know, that is an issue that is not just plaguing the poor rural counties across the state, but every county. You know, we have to make sure that we keep our brightest young people in the state of Ohio. You know, I have two brothers that have moved from Youngstown to Columbus and one out to Denver. And most of the friends that I have in Youngstown are either teachers, doctors, lawyers, or government workers, because the opportunities aren't there for young people. So I proposed a piece of legislation dealing with student debt in order to incentivize young people to stay. The bill's pretty simple. It says if you graduate from an Ohio university and you buy a home in Ohio within 5 years of graduation, the state would forgive a portion of your student debt. And that way, you're holding on to these people by giving them an opportunity. At the same time, you're revitalizing your communities so they move into the communities that you're trying to revitalize, and it works. Maryland just proposed the bill and passed the bill, and they're seeing a lot of success from that bill. You know, on the same page, you need to invest in our incubators, in our tech schools, so that our students have the ability to graduate and get that idea that's so bright and clean and they're so fired up, and get them in an incubator so that they don't have to pay for the tech support, they don't have to pay for rent, but they can foster that idea and turn it into a business. That's what we've done in some of the communities with the incubators, and it's been very, very successful. So it's about incentivizing young people to stay, but investing in their future and showing them that this state is friendly towards their goals and will give them the opportunity that they need.
One of the things that's changing so quickly for us is just the amazing transition of the economy in this country and this world. Right, by 2025, we anticipate that 2 out of 3 jobs will require some sort of post-secondary past high school, either an associate's, an apprenticeship, or a college degree. 2 out of 3 jobs. Right now in the state of Ohio, 1 out of 3. That's where we're at. So we're very, very behind on the effort of where the new workforce needs to be. That's why a few weeks ago I announced that we should have, like Tennessee, free community college. It's a way for us to invest in our folks. We're leaving around $90 million on the table every single year, and make sure that if that is what's needed to make sure that you have a good paying job, I don't think that we should have them having huge student debt to go to get an associate's or a credential. The state of Tennessee has seen a 30% increase in the number of young people and people that want to just get an associate's actually go into community college. And it's a way that we can invest in our future workforce to make sure that we have the kind of workforce where strong jobs will be in the future. We have to play for the next 20 years, like you said, Representative. Secondly, the city of Dayton, like I mentioned before, is the first city in the state to provide high-quality universal pre-K for every single 4-year-old. We know the games have changed, and these kids that aren't ready for kindergarten have to have the ability to be ready, because then they learn all the way through. We know that these predictions happen way sooner than ever before, and so we have to invest even before they get to kindergarten. This is about the lifelong learning for our whole state, and if we don't do that, we will not be able to compete in the next 20 years like you're talking about.
So I'd like to add a little bit, and it's going to be some of what's already been said, but from the treasurer's point of view, I hope to have governors I can work with that will actually do some of these things too. So one is that, of course, investing in high-speed broadband. That's been talked about. Why that's so important. If we're going to be competitive as a state, we have to build a digital infrastructure for the future. And making sure people have access to the internet is key for not only business growth, but even doing your homework, right? So we have to be competitive as a state and actually invest in that. I will look in the Treasurer's office to incentivize economic development using the bonding capacity to do that. We also need to invest in incubators. I agree with that, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I've had some experience doing that. At the University of Cincinnati, I led a incubation system. We call it 1819, which signified the beginning of our university. And it's a place that's being built right now, but it's exactly where we're going to have incubators go, we're going to have entrepreneurs go, but we're also going to have them work with our university there, because job growth happens a lot at universities. Almost every major idea that's come out of this country has come from a university at some point. So it makes no sense that we don't invest in education, and we're nearly last in doing so. So I'm going to use this platform to actually fight to make sure we're investing more in education, because we can't be competitive otherwise. And finally, looking at ways to make sure that more college students are going to stay here. There's many concepts, some of which have gone over, we've already gone over. One, I would like to propose, it's nothing I can do from the office, but I can certainly fight. It's called Pay It Forward, looking at students that, if you go here, you can attend college for free or very reduced costs. Kind of similar to Joe's idea, but just saying if you stay in the state for a certain period of time, that's when you begin to pay back your college loan. So there are ways to do this if you actually have leaders that are invested in thinking about the future. That has not been the focus in Columbus for a whole generation. But we need, this is why 2018 is so important. It's about our future kids. It's about our future. Thank you very much.
Hi, before Joe gets away here, but I'm from Erie County, and so representing, the Lake Shore counties here, along with Ashtabula and Lake County and Lorain, Cuyahoga, Ottawa, and Lucas County. I don't think I've missed any of them. But we know how important Lake Erie is to all of our economies, and there's been a big fight going on down in Columbus about naming it as a lake that has some issues, okay? And since we've got Rob from Cincinnati and Steve from Cuyahoga County, from the river and also the lake, but could you two, Dan and Joe, address what the issues are down there in Columbus with the lake?
Absolutely. I looked at this I try to go and see stuff so that I can talk about it, not from a piece of paper, but from experience. And so I wanted to see the blooms. So I went up about 3 months ago, went out on a boat, saw the blooms, saw the water intake in Toledo, learned from scientists, learned from specialists up there that said, look, we have a major problem here that we need investment. When these blooms come into the Toledo area, we only have one intake of water. So if we shut it off, then people don't have water. At least in Cleveland, there's 4. So that just really shored up the idea that I had last year where I co-sponsored a water bond bill with Senator Gardner from Toledo, who's a Republican, to put $1 billion of underground infrastructure upgrades into clean water systems. Every community from Dayton to Youngstown to Akron needs to upgrade their clean water systems. In Sebring, Ohio, we had lead get into people's water because they didn't put the right amount of chemicals in it, and then it ate the lead pipes, and then it got into people's cups when they were drinking, or got into the formula of kids when the mother was mixing the tap water with the powder. If we just take out the lead pipes and put pipes that aren't going to poison people, it'll put people to work, and it's got to happen eventually. So that $1 billion upgrade goes not only for Lake Erie, but throughout the community so that they can get some seed money to move their projects forward. So it's about investing, and you invest through a bond bill just like we do with our roads and bridges, just like we do with our third frontier. Ohioans are familiar with this and are willing to move forward with it. I just hope we can get this out of the House and the Senate to get it in the voters' hands in order to get that influx of dollars. But if we don't, we're going to have to continue to fight for priority spending up on the lake, or else we are going to face a major problem, whether it's this year, next year, or in 10 years. You can't just continue to kick the can down the road. So I appreciate the question, and I do have to leave. I know that life for all of us is broken into like half-hour and hour increments. My wife loves that, but this is how it goes. And so I do appreciate the opportunity. If anybody has questions that I wasn't able to answer, or you wanted further clarification, email me, call my legislative office. Just because I don't represent you on the map in the state Senate doesn't mean that I'm not going to be fighting for the issues that are important to this community and to this county. And so at the end of the day, we need a gubernatorial candidate that, on the Democrat side, that is going to actually represent the people's needs and act on those needs so that people can see that there's somebody that's not only fighting for them, but working for them. And that's the kind of candidate that I've always been for Senate. That's the kind of person that I've been as a representative for injured workers. I mean, that's the kind of father and husband that I try to be. You work as hard as you can every single day to provide for the people that you care about, and I care about every single Ohioan. So I do appreciate this opportunity, and sorry that I have to leave early. Thank you.
Amy, thanks for the question. As a mayor, I run a water system as well, providing water to 400,000 people across Montgomery County. And for sure, as Senator Schiavone was saying, mayors across the country have been calling for more infrastructure investment in water systems for over a decade. I mean, it's one of the, it's underground, so people can see how when bridges fall apart, but a lot of times they don't see what's happening to pipes. And so this is something we've been talking about just overall for the investment of water. Particularly with Lake Erie, though, the algae bloom issue is two reasons. Number one, the phosphorus runoff, and number two, global warming. And so the two are on top of each other, raising the bar over and over again. I'll use a city example. When these things happen, we know the phosphorus runoff is what's causing this, and it's going faster because the temperature is getting hotter and hotter each year. And we have a similar situation in cities where we have what we call when companies dump on land and they won't take responsibility for it, we threaten them with Superfund. And a Superfund is a pretty big deal to a city because if we engage the national EPA on a Superfund, we know that that will be not used for 20 to 30 years as we work to clean it up. And so it's a better incentive if we threaten Superfund to these companies and say, listen, you're going to be on the hook with the feds for 30 years if you don't get this right. Why don't you work with us? And I think the impairment issue is the same exact way, right? We can say to these agribusiness folks, listen, you can be on the impairment list over the decades, it will hurt us all, or you can continue to find a win-win for our lake and for you if you do things to affect phosphorus runoff. It's going to cost some money, it's going to take an investment from them, but I'm telling you for everyone, if they do that, it's better than them not going to impairment. And so I use that, I think the impairment stick is really important, just like you would with the Superfund site. You have to be not afraid to blink if they don't do it. But that's the kind of leadership we need in the governor's office that understands those kind of issues and have dealt with it over and over again as mayor. Thank you.
I'm a Clevelander, and right now, my office, I look every day out in that lake, which is the single most important asset that we have in the state of Ohio. Let me say that again. The presence of 20% of this world's fresh water off our northern coast is the single most important long-term asset we have in the state. And we're not doing enough to protect it. The other window, I look out at the river that was responsible for the Clean Water Act passing in the United States of America. And it's important to remember that, right? We in Ohio have a mixed legacy in protecting our water. And as U.S. Attorney, I was there on the front lines. We negotiated with Akron, with Toledo, with the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, upgrades in sewer and sewage infrastructure to protect from runoffs that was polluting our water. I stood on the banks of the Mahoning River, not far from here, and announced the first ever federal criminal indictment based upon dumping from fracking waste. I understand these are real risks that actually not only threaten our environment, but threaten our economy and our future. And we in Ohio, quite frankly, need to do a much better job at protecting those assets.
We have one last question from the audience, and it is from our City Council President-elect, John Roskovich.
I was wondering, Mr. Dettelbeck, if, I think it was 2012, Democrats in Ohio received like 300 and some thousand more votes than Republicans, but we only sent like 4 members to Congress. The state really is dragging on this gerrymandering issue. Is there anything you can do for us?
Yeah, well, the state actually, to take issue with this, our state's leading on the gerrymandering issue, actually. But we're leading in the wrong direction, right? And the guy I'm running against, Dave Yost, was one of the gerrymanderers in chief, right? He was one of the guys who sat in the Doubletree Suites bunker for 91 nights and drew districts where, you know, you can't even recognize them. And where now members of Congress don't have to talk to each other to work on problems. What they have to do is just fly back and forth and talk to people who agree with them and collect big checks. The worst example of that, let me just say, was not even just about, I used to think these were gerrymandered votes. What we learned in the plain dealer last week was that now you gerrymander money too, right? Who saw that when people saw that Congressman Renacci, by accident at the last second, didn't have the Timken corporate headquarters in his district, that the knives and pens and highlighters came out to make sure that he could collect the hundreds of thousands of dollars for his campaign every year by just doing a little jut down, as they called it. The Attorney General can and should do a lot. First of all, the Attorney General needs to make an independent assessment as to whether or not whatever districts are drawn actually fulfill the legal requirements of the Voting Rights Act and the U.S. Constitution. That's number one. Number two, this process has to happen in the open. And by the way, this isn't partisan. I will tell you, I will feel this way no matter who the governor is. If you're the governor, we're going to do this process in the open, in compliance with Ohio law, because what is going on with gerrymandering does not stand the light of day. It is absolutely one of these things that just can't happen in the open. So we need to make sure we're doing that, and if the law is not adequate with respect to open records and open meetings, we need to have special rules that we pass that apply to the redistricting process.
Thank you very much to our audience for their questions. We appreciate that. We've got a few more here that we're going to ask. So, Mr. Richardson, one of the things you mentioned was accountability, and one of the things your current office holder has done is the Ohio checkbook. Wanted to know if you would continue doing that, and if you would, what other transparency issues you...
It's a great question. So the current treasurer talks about the checkbook, and we would keep the program, and I think it could be modified. And it's a really great point to bring up here, because this office, he talks a lot about transparency, but he's not transparent in his own office. So here's some things we're going to change. As you may know, for the stable accounts, when he rolled those out, his office found a way to spend nearly $2 million in promoting himself on TV right before he was about to run for Senate. Never mind that his own marketing plan said you shouldn't spend a bunch of money on TV. They did it anyway. And beyond that, there was no record, there was no communication about how this plan took place. Now, usually, in order to spend money like this for these type of marketing programs, you have to go in front of the controlling board, which is bipartisan, and anything over $50,000 requires approval. What he did is just basically make a bunch of individual purchases to a bunch of individual markets under $50,000 that nearly added up to $2 million. So we're going to be clear with taxpayers about how we're spending money. And anything with marketing, we're going to be clear that it's actually in the interest of taxpayers, not just for pure self-promotion. So that's something we're going to do and be transparent, because it's not enough to say other governments should be held accountable. Everyone should be transparent. We also have to be transparent and accountable ourselves, and then also be efficient with the dollars that we're using. One clear example of efficiency I'd like to talk about too, because transparency is not enough. It doesn't matter unless you're efficient. We spend a lot of money on our criminal justice system, and out of the state treasurer's office, I will be responsible for most of the state facilities that we would bring online. We are the 4th largest prison population in the United States, larger than New York. And it has a lot to do with how we lock people away, a lot unnecessarily. And so I want to look to make sure that we are spending money in the most efficient way while keeping people safe. So we're going to do we're going to do an efficiency, a cost efficiency about how our criminal justice system is administered with experts, and make sure that we're doing it in a way that is fiscally responsible, while also not limiting people from opportunities unnecessarily.
Okay, we have a question for Mr. Dettelbach. As Ohio Attorney General, what would you do to protect immigrants who are part of Ashtabula's community, and what's your opinion about sanctuary cities?
These issues are very personal for me. I am the grandchild of immigrants to this country. My wife is an immigrant to this country. She was born in Mexico City and grew up in South Texas. My children are the children of immigrants to this country. In our history, where we as a country and we as a state have done best, we have been a magnet to attract working people and talented people from all over the world. So why is it now that we feel the need to go and paint a whiteboard sign that says "Get Out" and hang it over the Statue of Liberty's arm in New York Harbor?
It's neither moral, lawful, or smart. And for me, as Attorney General, we would do things to make sure that we have a state that welcomes people who are immigrants to this country. Now, with respect to sanctuary cities, there's so often not agreement on what it means to be a, quote, sanctuary city. And for me, that's important. So if you're talking about the idea of forcing mayors and forcing police chiefs to spend their valuable resources doing something that the federal government is supposed to be doing, which is enforcing our immigration laws, I don't want to do that. That's up to chiefs and mayors to decide what the crime threat is in their areas and to use their already stretched budget as efficiently as they can. But if we're talking about prohibiting law enforcement from talking to each other, I have to tell you that's not something that I'm in favor of. I dealt a lot with national security, I dealt a lot with terrorism, I dealt with a lot of crime in all different areas, drugs, corruption. And to me, I've seen it when we've prohibited law enforcement from sharing information with each other, even if they want to, and I don't think it's a good idea going forward.
This question is start with Mr. Delbach, but I'd open it up to all three of you. Foster care has been brought up and mentioned in other answers, but specifically, what would you like to see done about the increasing need not only for foster families, but for the number of children who are aging out of the system without any kind of support going forward?
This is something that's been brought up repeatedly by everybody here, is the cuts to local and county governments that we've seen over the last 8 years. I think we're now at, what, 55% cuts? And everybody, doesn't understand the kinds of things that this affects. This affects police, this affects treatment for addiction, and it affects county services like foster care. And to me, the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that people are getting the resources that they need. With respect to the specific regulations and the specific changes in the foster care system, I'm going to do something that I don't know if a lot of people who are more experienced in politics or my Republican friends do. I'm going to tell you I don't know what the right answer to that is. I'm open to learning more about it. I am not an expert in the foster care systems and the ins and outs of it, and I'll have to learn more.
And this is this is something that is bigger than spending or if we spend money on it or how we make cuts or if we don't. This is something we have to start investing as a community, as a people, and to make people understand the importance of wanting to help children that are in need. And sometimes it's often members of your own family. I know this. I have an adopted son, so it's a personal story for me. And so people need to know that we're going to have to do more to help people, because this is tough times for a lot of people. We've seen the opioid epidemic, which is, I imagine, exacerbating the problem. The issue happened a lot too during the crack cocaine epidemic, which affected African Americans more. I saw that happen a lot within my family. I saw the example of my parents, who we often took on members of my family, and I guess they passed down to me as well. I think all of us are going to have to step up more. This is one of those things that government can't solve. This has to be us together, doing it together, and making sure that we're doing more for each other.
Couple points I'd like to make. I think number one, we know that only 47 of the 88 counties actually have any kind of children's services. So think about that, because it's all locally funded. So 41 counties don't even have children's services to deal with. So again, this whole trickle down onto the ground, which is such an issue for our local communities. Secondly, the issue of kinship care is becoming larger and larger as the opioid epidemic is hitting harder and harder all our communities across the state. Imagine you're a family that is right on the poverty level. Your daughter is addicted to opioids. She loses her children, maybe 2 or 3, and you're on Social Security. How do you afford to take on your 3 children And there are these kind of tough decisions that are breaking families and breaking families' hearts every day in Ohio, because you don't get any dollars for kinship care if it's one of your relatives. These are the kind of things that are happening in our communities and around our kitchen tables every day, and it's got to change. If we're really serious about families, if we really believe that the child should stay with the family, we need to do everything we can to make sure that that family can stay together. And that's not what's happening right now because of these trickle-down cuts where they have, huge loopholes for corporations and something that's going to magically solve this problem. Secondly, when you talk about older kids coming out of the foster care system, we just turn this spigot on and then turn it right off. There should be a graduated effort to make sure that these kids still have supports, not just when they're turned 18 in one day, they suddenly have it all figured out, because Lord knows I didn't. Luckily I had support to make mistakes, but one mistake and you're done. There should be a graduated effort on that. 2% of foster care kids graduate from college in this state. 2%. The debt is stacked so desperately ahead of these kids, and it is not right. We have to give them a chance to. It is not their fault that they're in foster care, and we should have graduated efforts as they move and grow into becoming full adults. This is something that's affecting our communities over and over again, and something that the state is just closing their eyes and not dealing with.
Here's another question for all of you. In Ohio, we only seem to get high Democratic voter turnout in presidential election years. How will you appeal to those voters to get them to turn out for yourself and other Democratic candidates in 2018?
It's a great question. I think we have to make sure we actually have a message that resonates with them. And people are motivated not by, as Simon Sinek said, what you do or how you do it, but why you do it. And you have to have a message that's actually authentic and that people feel as if it's going to have the ability to not necessarily change their lives overnight, but they know that you're going to do everything possible to fight for them. To look back about what happened in 2016, part of what I think happened is that we didn't have a message that connected with people. They didn't feel like we were actually fighting to on their behalf, to really advocate for them. We have to make that clear. As Democrats, we are going to fight for you. This is what we believe, and we boldly stand for it. Then we got to go make sure that we meet people where they're at. All right. So make sure we meet people where they're at. Oh, much better. There you go. The microphone works. Meet people where they're at. Be willing to listen and go into communities. Not just go into communities when elections are up. Not just go to churches. Not just go talk to people when you need a vote. But go there when you're in office, when you get elected, time and time again, to listen to people. Because that is the problem. We can't just go to people when we need something. We have to be there for them the whole time.
To me, I think Rob is right. So first of all, we need to be present and listen. And I think we need to get away from the idea that people, just sort of automatically understand that we're the ones who are going to fight for them. We need to tell them, and more than that, we need to show them that when things are uncomfortable, when there's a disagreement, that we're willing to put skin in the game to help working people in Ohio. And then lastly, I'll say, for me, we need to emphasize, all of us, over and over again, that the people who are running this state and have run it for the last 2 decades have failed them. They have underperformed. We're leading the country in opioid deaths and lagging in job growth. We're leading in student debt, and we have a charter school with billionaires who are moving to Key West. We need to make sure that they get that the people who claim to have their backs right now are stabbing them in the back. And for me, that's a message we need to pound over and over again, so the people understand that we can do something for them, but we need a chance, and the people who are supposed to be taking care of them right now aren't.
I think the most important message for Ohioans is a message that people can relate to around what's happening at their kitchen table. I think we need a messenger that understands that and gets it, and that's really why I decided to get in the race, frankly. I think we needed somebody that could talk very directly to folks, and then also not only say, which I think is right, hey, they've owned this place for 26 of the past 30 years, they've owned it. But we have to say what we're going to do to make their kitchen table better. And I think that's a really key point for us. If we don't do that as a party, we have failed and we deserve to lose. We need to make sure that the message that we're talking about is how their lives can get better and what we're going to do about it. And then we actually have to go to those places. I'm from, like I said, the most conservative media market in the state of Ohio. Hillary Clinton did not come to this media market. It's the first time since 1988 that the Democratic nominee did not go to the Dayton area. We lost really bad. If they don't see you in these places, if they don't see you in these counties, it doesn't embolden the other Democrats that are there to stand up and fight. And we need every Democrat in this state. This is a hard state to win. It is not going to be easy. And just because Virginia got a big wave does not mean the wave is going to come here to Ohio. We have to have a message that emboldens people in counties all across the state, not just the big cities. And we have to make sure that we have a messenger that can relate to everybody, from big cities to small towns. That's why I got in this race. That's why I think a mayor running for governor is different enough and a little strange and able to get people's attention and make a difference about the change that can come to the state if we believe we can get it done. But it's going to take everybody in this room times a 10 or 100-fold for us to change this state. And I think it's worth it, because 2018 is going to be the difference maker on whether we go forward as a state or whether we go back. It is a very big deal, and that's why we're putting all of our time into this race.
We've asked a lot of questions, but I'd like to hear from you guys each individually. What do you feel your major issue? And I know we've talked about a lot of them, but again, boil it down. What is your major issue in the campaign, both in terms of what's going to be voter interest and what's most important to you, and how do you get that message across in a positive manner?
That's like a really broad question.
It is. So go where you'd like.
Say whatever you like. No. Like I said before, I think the difference in this race and what we need to do as a party to move our state forward is we need to have a different kind of messenger. And if we keep on doing the same old, we're going to get the same result as a party. And so I think that is very, very important. We also need to make sure that we're organizing, and the great work that the County Chairs Association is doing across the state, that your county chairs that are here that are working diligently to make sure that we are really leveraging that is important. But for me, the biggest issue in this race is the fact that local communities have been left out and left behind, and they're not better off. And it's because the State House crowd has continued to take money away and not invest in local communities. And then we're shocked when jobs aren't created, or we don't have opportunities for young people to live in these communities. We need to change that. I believe that local communities, if they have the opportunity, can govern themselves well and can have a real partnership with the state. And that's what's worked in Ohio when we've done that. I want to do that again. That's why I'm running. I think that's the kind of governor we need, is someone that's been on the ground, knows how to get stuff done, and pretty much cuts the crap on this other stuff. And that's what I think is the most important thing in this race.
For me, as a person who spent 2 decades as a prosecutor and a civil rights attorney, I'm really proud to be a lawyer. And to me, the most important thing in this race for Attorney General is protecting the rule of law. This is pretty basic stuff to me. And unfortunately, we're falling short on it. The basic thing that the law guarantees us in this state and this country is the fundamental idea that there's just one set of rules. And as I said before, in every area you can look at, whether it's the heroin and opioid epidemic, where yes, we need to hold cartels accountable for distributing pills, for distributing heroin in our communities, but we also need to hold pharmaceutical companies accountable for breaking the rules and bringing hundreds of millions of pills into our community. Whether it's public safety, yes, we need to hold people accountable who are out there robbing banks and getting away with a couple $1,000s. But we need to hold bank executives accountable if they're breaking the rules and getting away with a couple $1 million. Whether it's terrorism, yes, I did terrorism cases. We need to hold people accountable who are attacking our way of life. But you know what? We need to hold me accountable as the former federal prosecutor responsible for 6 million people, to make sure I'm following the Constitution and I'm following the law. To me, that very basic idea that nobody's below the law and nobody's above the law in every single area is under assault. And we need to stand up together to fight in every single area to make sure that that's not some ideal on a document that sits in Washington and then goes underground overnight. That is something that's real in Ashtabula, in Cleveland, in Cincinnati, in Columbus, in Chillicothe, all over the state. That's something that people think is really the truth in their daily lives.
So I think the most important thing is to understand the stakes in this election. To understand that this is not a regular election. This is not about Democrats versus Republicans. I believe this fundamentally. The very stake of who we are as a nation is at stake in 2018. That's what this is about. So the best question I was asked on the trail was someone asked me from the Cleveland City Club, the head of the season of the club, said, Rob, how do you deal with the reemergence of white supremacy while also other groups are pushing back harder than they ever have? And the state of the country, how we're going right now, what is your role there? And I thought about a conversation I had with Andrew Young, who's a civil rights icon. I got a chance to meet him while at the University of Cincinnati. And I asked him a question. How did you deal with everything, you and Dr. King, he was right next to Dr. Martin Luther King, was his key advisor. How did you deal with all of the hatred, all of the rhetoric that was pushed at you and still responded in the way you did? Because I asked him, I'm not sure if I could have done that. And he answered the question, he said, Rob, you have to understand something. Racism is a disease. It's only cures love. So why we're running right now, why I'm running is because I love this state and I love this country. And I don't define it as making people stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or singing God Bless America. That's all fine and well. Love is a lot more substantive to me than that. It requires us understanding a lot more. And sometimes love makes you uncomfortable. It requires us to be challenged. I know this is part of my experience from my family. Vivian Malone, she's my cousin, and the first African-American woman to attend Alabama University. But she was met there by a governor who didn't want her there, by a crowd that didn't want her there. Governor Wallace, the man who made himself famous for saying segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And that crowd was saying, why are you here? You can go to any school. The truth is she couldn't. She went to that school because she loved this country. And she wanted to push us to be the nation that we say we are. We are at that moment right now in this country. Let us stand up for it.
Thank you. We needed that, especially at this time. And we're going to be wrapping things up. I'm going to give you a couple seconds here to gather your thoughts for your closing comments. But on behalf of all of us in extreme Northeast Ohio, who, and Mayor Whaley, you can appreciate this, sometimes we feel like we are the redheaded stepchild of Ohio. No, well, no. You made that comment that we have to get out into the rural areas. And Ashtabula County, Geauga County, critically important because if Democrats are going to win, it's the blue arc from Lorain County to Ashtabula down to Mahoning that we're going to have to carry. So I want to thank you for being here and not neglecting us in Northeast Ohio. Believe me, I know what the drive is like. And I want to, in full disclosure, we want to have you back. You do not need a passport to visit us. French is not our #1 language here. And yes, we are still part of Ohio, a very important part of Ohio. We are the only part that has 2 deep water ports, correct? And I could go on. Some of you know how I enthusiastically and shamelessly promote our corner of the state. But thank you for making the long trip here. And with that, we're going to allow you now to make your closing statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, and appreciate all the great work you do advocating for this part of the state, for sure. So it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you here today, and certainly appreciate active Democrats interested in a race that's going to happen in 6 months, coming to learn more about us, and appreciate your open-mindedness in this race. There's one thing I want to leave you with, it's this, and I think I've pounded it over and over again. False claims and more broken promises are not going to move this state forward. If we want to turn the state around, we need someone who knows what's going on and knows how to get things done. We need a leader that's not afraid to face these challenges head on, and a leader that's not afraid to have bold new ideas and change. So if you believe in the dignity of work, then why can't we create good paying jobs with wages we can raise a family on? If you believe in the power of education, then why can't we make high quality pre-K a reality for every child? Why can't we make community college a reality for every hardworking Ohioan? If you believe that heroin truly is a cancer eating away at Ohio from within, then why shouldn't the drug companies who caused this mess pay to clean it up? I believe Ohio's best days can be ahead of us. And if you believe that, I'm Nan Whaley, and I hope you'll join me on this race for governor. Thank you.
As somebody who actually is from this part of the state, I just want to say something about my two colleagues here, which is they're here all the time. I see them all the time in Northeast Ohio, so they don't need a passport anymore, right? We can just grandmother and grandfather them in. Look, I'm Steve Dettelbach, and I want to be the Attorney General of the state of Ohio. I was your U.S. Attorney for 7 years, appointed by President Obama, recommended by Senator Brown for that job. And, we weren't perfect in the Obama administration. I wasn't perfect, but we look pretty good now, don't we? And the reason that we look good is because we spent every day, and I spent every day, trying to fight to make sure that the rules were followed, that the law was followed, that there was some fairness in the system. Look, we can't promise and don't promise in this country and this state the same result for everybody, right? But we do promise a level playing field where people have the same shot to do better for their kids, no matter where they live, no matter what they look like, no matter how they pray, no matter who they love, no matter how they vote. And we've gotten away from that in this state. We have. We've gotten to a place where too often, there's not a level playing field where everybody's engaging in the pursuit of happiness, right? But some people are running up a 40-degree incline with the wind in their face and the rain in their hair, and other people are just coasting downhill with the breeze at their back. That can't be, right? We have to apply the same set of rules to every single person in this state. We have to make sure that every vote counts. So we have to fight against gerrymandering that's unfair. We have to make sure that every kid gets the same opportunity in school. So we have to make sure that we're not draining off to places like ECOP, billions of dollars that are supposed to be used to educate our kids. And we have to make sure that when we're dealing with the heroin and opioid crisis that's stopping us, that we're doing what Nan said. We're holding accountable not just drug dealers, but drug companies if they break the rules as well. That's why I want to be your Attorney General. That's why I want to fight for the people of Ohio with you, and I hope you'll help.
I always like to stand up at the end, and I want to just thank, first of all, Ashtabula for having us today. This is not for me, goodbye, this is hello. And I want you to know that, Nicole, please stand up. She's with labor, she's with me, labor folks, she's 45. She's going to make sure I come back, trust me. So I will be here on a regular basis as much as I can be. I want to get back to what I said earlier. I really love this state and I love this country. We are at a defining, critical moment within our nation. We truly are. And as I think about it, loving your country is really about understanding this is about the long run. This is not about short-term decisions. Having a son now helps me see this. I look into his eyes and I want to make sure he has better opportunities than I have. But I am deeply concerned about what I hear and the climate I see from the politicians and the leaders currently right now, both in our state and within our nation. Because words matter, what you say matters, and it can really affect people. I know it from part of my personal experience. From about the 2nd through the 8th grade, I was in learning disability classes and struggled at school, but I always had a strong support system, so I knew I could do more. So I had a conversation with my 8th grade teacher and told her that I wanted to start preparing for college, and she said, "Rob, you're never going to college." Luckily, I had a much better conversation with my parents, and my mom's words still stay with me to this day. She said, "Look, Rob, you don't have to be defined by anybody's low or narrow expectations of you. You define yourself, for yourself, by yourself." So I had support, and I had opportunities, but that story turns out differently for so many other kids and families. That's what's at stake. That's why I'm running to fight to expand access and opportunities for all Ohioans, for everyone. We have to get back to investing and empowering people, not just tearing each other apart. That's the current environment we have, and we have to reject it. This is not about Democrats. This is about who we are as a nation. Ohio determines the direction, so together, let us come back to investing and working together as a people, as one nation and as one state. I hope you will join me, and I hope to join together. We have to do more. We have to fight more, because we can take nothing for granted. The future is not guaranteed. We, all of us, have to fight for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that concludes our town hall. We appreciate you coming out. The candidates will be around for a little bit of time to answer questions. Thanks again.